Alright, so Season 3 Battlefield 6 is here, and I'm just not excited. I wish I could be. I want to be positive. I say this a lot, but no. There's just nothing here for me for Battlefield 6. At least not anymore. Well, let's just go ahead and get the new content out of the way. There's the new map, quote-unquote new map, Golmud Railway, which is a remake of the Battlefield 4 map, Golmud Railway. It wasn't good for infantry before. It's still not good for infantry now. There are more buildings. There's a little bit of verticality, you can argue. But it just doesn't feel good. It feels very random. So like when you go into infantry, you either end up in this area that just feels very chaotic and random, or you end up fighting against tanks and other vehicles. So it is infantry focused. If you want to play as an engineer, if you want to run vehicles, that's the map to do it in. Anything else you want to do? No, you just play any other map. There's no reason to be playing on that map or anything else. That's been the problem with Battlefield 4 map design. Either the maps lean way too vehicle heavy or they're exclusively infantry. There's very little in between. Even when you get into the DLC maps, it's either one or the other. There are some maps in Battlefield 4 that are more balanced, but not really, especially the launch maps. Like, it's the map to reinvent. It's not the map to just port over. And they just did not reinvent it well enough for the infantry combat to feel different, or for the infantry to have a better experience than what they would have had on the original map. Moving onwards, I'm going to talk about and discuss, as others have online, is just the changes to the recoil. Season 2, the recoil was way too consistent. The weapons were way too good. And basically just became a point of pick the weapon with the best damage and highest rate of fire, and you were going to win all of your gunfights. And so now they made some changes that make it so that's not necessarily the case, but still high damage, high rate of fire is going to be the best bet, as so long as the recoil is manageable. So something like the M4 is decent at 10 to 15 meters, and then anything past that, 30 meters, 40 meters, it's pretty much useless. Now, to show you what I mean by that, I'm here on a custom build, on a custom map, to show recoil patterns, and essentially just show everything that's happening with this game in terms of the weapon recoil, weapon handling, and why I think it's just not great. First and foremost, typically in these kind of games, you would have what would be called a recoil pattern. So if I were to fire the gun like this, that would be the recoil pattern for this weapon every single time. You'll have one shot here, two shots next to each other, then a shot off to the right, then to the left, and then that entire mess. Now, typically a recoil pattern will look cleaner than this, a little cleaner than this, but because of other systems that are in this game, it's not exactly like that. If I were to fire again, and look closely, there are going to be a few differences. So you see over here, the first shot went off to the left, and they're a lot closer than they are from here to here. And then the third shot is either one of these two, which lines up more or less over here, and then you got the rest of the mess. And this is not great, because in close range, this doesn't really mean anything. You know? But as the further you get, the harder and more inaccurate the weapon is going to feel. Not necessarily to the point where the weapon is useless, but it is to the point where you can't actually control where the bullet is landing. Now, the good thing about the L85 is that it is a very accurate weapon. So even though there are some differences from recoil pattern to recoil pattern, it still holds up really well from shot to shot. And again, the problem is that I don't know when I'm going to get this versus this versus this. And the first 2 or 3 shots do make the biggest difference, because if these land, then I'm on target. If they don't land, then I have to start adjusting. And then everything else that this game throws at you makes it impossible to do that. So you have to stop firing, wait a second, and then try again. So what is causing these other things to happen? Well, another thing that Battlefield does very often is what's called bullet spread or recoil bloom. For the sake of this video, we're just going to call it bullet spread. And what bullet spread does is that the longer you hold down the trigger, the more inaccurate the weapon becomes. So as you can see, I still have a general area of where the bullets are going to land, but I can't actually control where they're going to land. So even if I was going to do my best to control this weapon, this is me holding down the mouse now to compensate for the recoil, I'm going to end up with a wider pattern because I don't know when the bullet is, or when the gun is going to pull right. I don't know when it's going to pull left. And because of that, I can't actually keep the weapon concentrated. Bullet spread, it's okay. It's not a mechanic that I like, but I understand why it's in Battlefield. Again, it's to deter players from just mag dumping at any range. But at the same time, if you just increased the recoil, so like it ends up here or here, then you don't need this mess. You can just have people try and control the weapon and just increase the recoil as they're holding down the trigger, which will prevent most players from trying to hold down the trigger and just mag dump every single fight. So what is the difference? The difference is with a set recoil pattern, I can actually counter it with my own inputs. With bullet spread, I don't have a way to counter that other than to let go of the trigger, wait, and then fire again. And then even at that, the only thing I can control, kind of, are the first 4 shots. Anything after the 4th or 5th bullet, it all ends up in bullet spread and however much bullet spread I get or don't get. Now let's talk about the third system. Typically, when you have bullet spread, it doesn't kick in until the 4th or 5th bullet. But then the question I have to ask, why am I having such different patterns on the first 3 shots, even with a weapon as accurate and consistent as the L85? Well, that's because Battlefield 6 has also introduced random recoil. Perhaps random recoil was already in the game. I don't know. I'm not going to do my research on that, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But the thing is that when you have random recoil, depending on how random it is, it can end up really giving you very different results. And now instead of having a weapon that's actually accurate and a weapon that you can actually control and know where your bullets are going, you end up with these different random patterns that you don't have any control over. You have a general idea of where they're going to land, but when you go to fight and shoot at a target that's 50 meters out, 60 meters out, this is not the same as this. It's not the same as this. The input I would have to do to control this is different than the input I would have to do to control this. Because of those inconsistencies, we end up with weapons that just feel bad to use. So let me go ahead and pull up the M433, which will show it in a much more drastic sense of what I'm trying to explain. So this is a base M433. It's going to be a little unfair, but again, we can at least see what the base recoil is going to look like. Okay, so there's a fair bit of horizontal. It goes up and to the right, then up to the left, and then bullet spread does the rest, right? So we try again over here. And what you're going to see with these weapons that have heavy horizontal recoil is that the horizontal recoil is not being applied in the same exact way every time. So you see we have up, we have the first shot, then up to the right, then up and to the right again, then a small cluster, then up and to the left, up to the left, up to the right, so on and so forth. Then we go here, up and to the left. Instead of up and to the right, we go up and to the left, back up to the right. Instead of going up and to the left, we go up and to the right again, and then up and to the left, and then up and to the left, and then everything else here. So you can see there is differences. It may seem, without tracing it, that these are virtually the same, but they're not. Again, what I would have to do to counter the recoil once it gets here is not the same as what I have to do to keep the gun shooting straight here. And as always, I like to just show what a controlled spray would look like. So let's do that. And then even with the controlled spray, you see that how much wider it is, and it's even wider than what I was getting with the L85. Mainly because there's a lot more horizontal recoil on this weapon. So why does this matter? It matters because taking a fight against an enemy at a range is going to be very different compared to using a weapon that actually shoots straight. Now obviously I don't expect to hold the trigger down and get a kill at 100 meters. I'm fine having to tap fire or trying to burst fire to get the same result. We go ahead and get a respawn and just show in a more fair light what the M433 does with attachments. So this is an M433 with a handful of attachments on it. There's your base recoil, and then this is controlled. And while it is arguably better, it's not significantly better. And still, there's not really like consistency with the recoil. So those are my complaints. It's just upsetting because, you know, a system like this, it's designed to prevent you from firing at enemies, you know, at 50 meters and further, unless you tap fire or burst fire. But as you saw with the L85, I was able to do that just fine without any issue. So it does depend from gun to gun. But this kind of system, bullet spread and recoil random recoil, it hurts every weapon. Don't get me wrong. It hurts every weapon, but it's going to hurt the weapons with more recoil more than the weapons that have more vertical than horizontal recoil, or weapons that just don't have recoil to begin with. So, and one other thing to add in this video is that it's not so much that the recoil or weapon recoil or gunplay is why I'm hating this game or just not enjoying my experience. That is a big part of it, but there are other parts of it. Netcode is still horrible. Character visibility is still horrible. Lighting on Eastwood especially is horrible. Lighting on the New York maps can be bad from place to place. And it just feels like, you know, it's death by 1,000 cuts. There are just so many things that are happening that I can look at. And it's like every time I turn a corner, you know, something doesn't work. Something doesn't feel right. I'm dying because of random recoil. I'm dying because I can't see enemies clearly. And I have to rely just on the 3D spotting with the dots over their heads to know what I'm shooting at half the time. And so, but you know, there's just so many different obstacles that this game throws at you, mainly because of bad game design and just because the developers are being rushed to get this out the door. And now they have to rush to try and fix it all. And again, I don't think this will ever get to a point where the game will feel the way it should. And unfortunately, you know, the vision for it has passed and we just have to deal with that. So I don't expect to put much more time into Battlefield 6, if at all, because we're 3 seasons in, netcode is still busted, character visibility is still busted, and now the weapons are random. So there's just nothing for me to look forward to playing whenever I look at Battlefield 6 in my library. I always ask myself, why? Why would I put myself through that when I could be playing other games? Games that actually, you know, have good gunplay. Games where the enemies are visible. And I could actually, you know, shoot at targets without them disappearing into a puff of smoke. And without them just blending into the environment. That's my rants on that. And that'll be it for this video. Hope you guys learned something new. Let me know what you guys think about all this. But it's just frustrating that, you know, DICE is continuing trying to like reinvent the wheel when they could just add recoil and then add bullet spread and call it a day, and just add more or less recoil as time goes by to better even out the spread of these weapons. Since we don't have that, they're just relying on making things random just to make them random, and we have to suffer for it. So hope you guys learned something new. And let me know what you guys think about this update, Season 3. Do you like random recoil and bullet spread? What are your thoughts on it? I think it's fine to have bullet spread. I don't think it's fine to have random recoil pretty much ever. If we were going to have one or the other, just have bullet spread. Don't give us random recoil. Bullet spread is random enough. We don't need another system built on top of bullet spread to make the weapons even more inaccurate than what they already are. Just increase the recoil. That's it. Increase the recoil, add bullet spread, and you're done. So hopefully they'll learn. Hopefully maybe this battlefield, maybe another battlefield, they'll do that. And we'll be able to rejoice at that by then. But until then, I'm Mr. Rain, and I'll see you guys in the next one.